is the Patriarch Zen. We have two requirements. First is the introduction to the Patriarch Zen and the practice in these 2 days. And the topic is all things will follow the mind. So this is the directions to practice the Buddha teaching. So if we don't have the direction, we won't be able to practice effectively the Buddha teaching. The Buddha wants to liberate everybody from the suffering and the misery. That's why we have the Dharma, the Sutra, to help us and direct us to the practice. If we don't be careful, we might mistaken the rock as the pearl. Just like a Buddha said that when you go to the forest to look for the core of the trees, if you don't be careful, you can only get the bark of the tree. So we need to go directly into the core of the practice. And the topic is all Dharma, or all things will go back to just one mind. So the stories of the Dharma talk is to remind us to go back to the practice. When you understand the Dharma, you need to practice, and the practice will make you understand more about the sutra and the teaching of the Buddha. So we have the schedule for all people to follow and practice. For some who can practice in the morning, some can come and practice in the afternoon. That's a chance for you to practice. Doesn't matter. However, you need to come and practice no matter what time that you attending. Just practice. Don't be afraid that you don't understand the Buddha teaching. Just practice, and eventually you will realize and understand the real meanings of the Buddha teaching. If you only stop at the understanding and the knowledge of the Buddha teaching, then that's just the normal life that you're living in. But that won't be able to apply it in the real life, because our life is always in the dualism. And if you apply the right Dharma in the practice, then we can liberate ourselves from all of those thinking in the mind. So a story is Salatvat is a disciple of the Buddha. When he met Sazi, he heard a verse from the sutra. All Dharma is from the conditions, forming from all the conditions, and all conditions will be destroyed in this life. So based on that, Salapat have heard that verse from Asahi monk, and he want to be his teacher, his student. Even though Salapat is excellent disciples of the Buddha, and he has the ability to a wisdom to understand the Buddha Buddha teaching. When he had the ability when he was young, he can understand all the Dharma, and he can interpret the Buddha's sutra. But when he listened to Siddha teaching, he wanted to be Siddha students. However, finally he became the Buddha students. So the verse in the poem is, all Dharma is formed by the conditions, and all the Dharma will be destroyed by the condition too. So the Buddhists have to contemplate on that and teaching like that. So it's the same meanings of all Dharma is the creation of the mind. Those are just the words, the teaching from the Buddha. In order to understand that verse fully, you need to practice. Like a poem in Hoàng Nghiêm Sutra, the Buddha said that if our practitioner want to understand the 3 generations of the Buddha meanings, the Buddha Dharma, you need to contemplate all Dharma are impermanent. So if we're running only after the words, we're running after the conditions, and we will follow only the circle of birth and death, and we might mistaken the sutra words of the Buddha teaching. That's why The Buddha used many skillful means to help people to practice, not to understand. The knowledge or understanding are the disease that all sentient beings had for several lives. So, in order to follow the Buddha's teaching, we need to practice. As in Vinyak Sutra, the Buddha also have another example. For all Dharma is a creation of the mind. So, for a person, when their body is spinning at one place, they saw everything around them spinning. Everything surrounding them are not spinning. It's just because they're spinning their body. That's why they see everything surrounding them spinning. So that's the same thing when we have the thinking going on in our mind. We saw all the Dharma have the birth and death. So in order to stop all the Dharma from birth and death, we need to stop all the thinkings in the mind. It's just like when you spin your body, you feel like or you saw the house is spinning along. In order to stop the house from spinning, you need to stop your body from spinning. However, the house is never spun. It's just because you spin. You spin your bodies at one place. That's why you saw the house is spinning. So it's the same when you have a thinking in your mind is spinning. That's why you saw all the Dharma is spinning, which means it has the birth and death. It's just like disease of your eyes. Your eyes are dazzled and you saw sparkles in the eyes, in the air. The air or the space have no sparkles just because your eyes are diseased. That's why you saw the sparkles in the air. So in order to fix the problem, you're not trying to destroy the sparkles in the air, but you go back to fixing the problem of your eyes, the disease in your eyes. That's why the Buddha is always have the remind us to practice in order to destroy all of these thinkings in the mind. So the poems that everybody have heard in the sutra, just like in the Mahayana, in all retreat, or in formal sutra, at the end, we always have the heart sutra to chant on. Those are just like an ultimate. The ultimate meanings that we use to go back to the practice. So the Buddha have been teaching, talking to help all the people to practice in several years of using the skillful means, and the Heart Sutra is the last means that the Buddha used in order to have people to go back to their own Buddha wisdom. So in the sutra, the Heart Sutra, the Buddha used only 263 words, but he used the words of nothing in order to help people to detach themselves from everything. When we're practicing, we will see the Heart Sutra will complete detach us from everything that's going on in the mind. We started with a detachment of the eye, the ear, the nose, tongue, the bodies, and thinking. Those are the 6 senses that we're detaching from. Those are the attachments of the normal people. And then we go into the Four Noble Truth. The sutra, the Heart Sutra, also detach us from those Theravada attachments. And then go into the 12 levels of attachments in Bichi, and ultimately even the 6 practices in Mahayana branch, the Heart Sutra also detach us from that. And even the Nirvana, the wisdom and the will, Nirvana, we need to detach ourselves from those in order to go into the Buddha nature. So when we're practicing, we need to have the wisdom seed, plant with the wisdom seed in our Buddha mind. And eventually we will realize our own Buddha nature. So the practice is based on the learning, the understanding, the knowledge, and only the practice will help us to digest all of those understanding and knowledge that we had learned. If we don't practice, we won't be able to see the Buddha meanings. And if we don't detach ourselves from all of those that we see or achieve, then we won't get the ultimate goal. Different levels of sentient beings will have different ways of practice. It's just like an example of a kid and an adult. Kids need a simple way of practice. A simple way to practice, just like the kids can only digest certain kind of foods. They cannot eat adult food because it won't be absorbed into their system. When they grown up, then they can digest those adult foods. That's why different levels of studying for different level of people who have different ability to practice. When we practicing, we need to make a strong vows and have a strong mindset in order to practice. And when we have that strong mindset, strong vows, then we can trade in everything for the practice. It's just like a student. When a good student, they always want to study. If they don't want to study, they won't be able to study. And they will cultivate themselves by studying all the time, and they become the good students. Same for people who practicing the Buddha teaching. We need to have the mind of practice. We make a strong vow of practicing in order to walk forward the ultimate goal. So it's hard to have these bodies, human bodies, in order to meet Buddha teaching is also very hard. That's why when we meet, we have this human body and we meet the Buddha teaching, we need to go into the practice. So we now going into the understanding of the 4 levels of teaching in the Buddha Sutra. We're using with clear explanations for these 4 levels of teaching, even though the teaching from the Buddha is like salt water. All the salt waters have the taste of salty taste. It doesn't matter. However, when we practicing the Buddha practicing the right Buddha, we need to detach ourselves from all the thinking in the mind. If we still attach ourselves to those thinkings in the mind, then we going on the wrong path. So for the Buddha teaching, if you still have the attachment to all those thinkings in the mind, which means you still going on the wrong path. the ultimate goal of the Buddha teaching is achieving nothing, nothing to ask for. If you still have something to achieve, something to ask for, then you still have that attachment in your mind. So for the Theravada, they have the attachment on certain things that they need to detach themselves from. For the Mahayana, they also have a little bit of attachment on certain things that they need to practice in order to detach themselves from those. And the ultimate goal is to detach yourself from everything in the mind. So we need to do the practice. The practice is a way for us to detach ourselves from all of the thinkings in the mind. The Buddha knew that sentient beings have a lot of attachment. That's why depends on the level of attachment. The Buddha has different skillful means in order to help them to practice, in order to detach themselves from those attachments and go on to the higher levels. However, all the teaching are just the directions for us to practice in order to detach ourselves from everything going on in the mind. So in the Buddha times, there was practitioners from other religions. He have the practice of bowing to everything that he saw, and he thought he learned that from his ancestor, and he doesn't understand. He didn't understand what he's doing, even though doing the practice of bowing down to everything. However, he didn't understand what he's doing. So when the Buddha saw him on the way and he came out to bow the Buddha, and the Buddha asked him, "Do you understand what you're practicing? What is the meanings of what you're doing?" He said that he didn't know. Those are just a practice from his ancestor. So he just doing that accordingly. So the Buddha explained to him that the practicing of bowing is to pay respect to his ancestor, pay respect to the place that he's living on, and pay respect to all the one that helping him in this life. So the Buddha told him that when you're doing something, you have to know the purpose of what you're doing. So from the Buddha teaching, he detached himself from the thinking of what he practicing is from the ancestor only without a purpose. So the Buddha have used the skillful means in order to help him to detach himself from the, the practice that we done without knowing the purpose. So in another story, the Buddha has helped a woman who was suffering because her son was her son died, and he brought his son corpse to the Buddha and asked the Buddha to help her. So the Buddha used a skillful means to help her, that I will help to your son if you can go and find an ash, find some ash from a family that have no one dying, no one died. So the woman was very happy that she went to every single house, every house that she asked for the ash, some ash. Everyone want to help her to give her the ash, but she asked if there is anybody have died in your family, and they said yes. So he went to all the houses, and he couldn't find any single house that have no one died from this life. So from that, she realized that no house have a person, no house uh, doesn't have a person who died. So she realized that, and she came back to the Buddha with that realizations and decided to bury her son. So the Buddha is always using the skillful means to help people to practice and realize their own problem. So go back to the Buddha teaching when he talked about the four noble truths. We started with a suffering, and then the reason of the suffering, and the way to destroy those sufferings, and how to practice to achieve that state of no suffering. So in the explanations, the with K Zen master, he explained that in the Theravada branch, they use the Four Noble Truths to practice in order to destroy the one thought of ignorance. So they have the way of contemplations on the breathing in order to practice to detach themselves from those suffering, the reason of suffering, the way to practice, and the way to achieve the practice. So the studying of the Theravada is to detach themselves from one thought of ignorance. And that is based on the attachment to the mind, to the materials. Then going to one more levels, that is a bitchy levels. The attachment is to the mind, and their practice is to destroy the detach themselves from one thought of ignorance, but going into the roots of ignorance and attach themselves to the roots of ignorance. And they use the 12 levels of practice from ignorance to death, the 12 levels of practice. So they practice to destroy the one thought of ignorance, but they attach themselves to the roots of ignorance. Now, going to the next level is the Mahayana branch. They believe in everything is from the mind. They want to destroy the roots of the ignorance. So they use the 6th level of practice in order to detach themselves from the roots of our ignorance. So the directions is to detach themselves from the roots of our ignorance. And they use the practice of 6 levels of practice in their branch in order to destroy the root of our ignorance. And one more level is the Patriarch Zen. And this is the last ultimate goal, which follow the directions that there's no mind, no true mind, or no true materials. And this is the ultimate goal that we use just the questions, unanswered questions, and the doubt in order to reach the ultimate goal, which is the Buddha nature, to realize the Buddha nature. So the first 3 levels of practicing the Theravada, the Vichy, and the Mahayana. They are the indirect ways of practicing. And the last one is a direct practice of cultivating the mind. So in our practice, we always have the way to calm down this mind of worrying, of fear. The mind is always working, always attaching, have the attachment to something that's going on in the mind. That's why we call that the elusive thinking in the mind, always there. And it's because of those creations that always going on in the mind that causing the seed of all the karma, and that lead us to the suffering and all the misery in this life. And all of those are just ignorance, all those are just the elusive creations of our own mind. So based on the 4 levels of practicing in with K Zen Master explanations, depends on different levels of attachment. People will use different skillful means from the Buddha to practice. However, from the lower level to the higher level, we need to detach ourselves from everything from those lower level and proceed to the higher levels in order to get the ultimate goal, which is the Buddha nature. So the 4 levels of teachings are based on the teaching of the Buddha. Those are just explanations to help people to practice. When the Buddha got enlightenment after 49 years under the Bodhi tree, he had said that all sentient beings have a Buddha nature. Just because they have some kind of attachment to something, that's why they won't be able to realize their own Buddha nature. That's why the Buddha thought of entering the nirvana right away, because all sentient beings are very stubborn and always have attachment to something. When he had that thoughts of entering the nirvana, uh, the kings of all angels from above come and bow to him and ask him to stay with that life and use skillful means in order to help all people, different levels of attachments, to practice in order to liberate themselves from all of the thinkings in the mind, from all the attachment that they had. So just because different people have different attachments, that's why the Buddha have different skillful means in order to help them to practice. And that's why the Buddha teaching, all the Buddha teaching, have condensed into the 3 levels of Buddhism. And the last one is those the Patriarch Zens, which is the direct practice of cultivation of the mind, and that is the Patriarch Zen that we're practicing right now. when the Buddha in a Linzern retreat, he have he picked up of lotus flower and Mahakayip saw it and smiled, and the Buddha decided to give that methods of practice, direct practice um, to Mahakayip, and he was the first leader of the Patriot Zen, the, the first patriot of the Patriot Zen. So in this practicing, we don't use the words, we don't use the explanations, we only use the practice. However, when we said we don't use the words, we don't use the explanation, doesn't mean that we destroy the words or explanations. We use the means of words and explanation to direct people to the practice. And when we practice, we will detach ourselves from all those words and explanations. When we don't understand, we thought that there's a contradictions in our practice. However, when we practice, we will be able to realize there's no contradictions in the words or explanations. And we realize the real meanings of the Buddha and the Patriarch in those words and explanations. That's why the Buddha have taught many methods in his sutra. However, at the end, he said that he have taught nothing at all. So in order to understand the Buddha understanding, understand the Buddha words, Buddha explanations, we need to practice. In the Patriarch Zen, in order to practice effectively, you need to believe in your own Buddha nature, and you start the practice from there. No matter what level of attachment that you have, if you don't practice, you won't be able to get the wisdom of the Buddha nature. You won't be able to reach the ultimate goal. So those are just words of explanations to guide you slowly into the practice of the Patriarch Zen. When we practice the Patriarch Zen, the doubt will sweep up all of these words and explanations for us automatically, and we will see the compassions from the Buddha and the Patriarch to help us in practicing and reach the enlightenment sometime in the future. When we realize the Buddha words and explanations, we will believe in our practice more and more. And from the practice, everybody will be able to understand the real meaning of the Buddha explanations and words. In the Heart Sutra, the Buddha taught us that form is formless and formless is form. Those are the words, only the words of explanations. But when we practice, we will really understand what is form or what is formless, and what does it means by form is a formless and formless is forms. When we do in the practice, we need to detach ourselves from all of the thinkings in the mind, the good, the bad, the right, wrong, all those holistic aspects in the mind. We don't attach ourselves to those. Everything still happening surrounding us. However, those are just a creation of the mind. We don't attach ourselves to them. So what is the practice in the Patriarch Zen's? In the Buddha times, um, the Buddha have nothing to teach, only some um, only um, only pick up the flowers, and that the teaching already from the Buddha. There's no words, no explanations for us to attach to. That's why the disciple who followed, which is Mahakazip, got the enlightenment right away. So in our Patriarch Zen right now, nowadays, we're using the questions, we're using the unanswered questions and the doubt in order to practice, to walk toward the pre-thinking aspect of the mind. So when we practicing asking the questions have no answer. That's why it will give us a doubt. Just like a kid, an infant, when it was born, he knowing nothing, and that the knowing built up when they grow up, and those knowing interfere himself from the Buddha nature. So the knowing and not knowing are both the creation of the mind. They are also the dualistic aspect of the mind. So when we doing the Patriarch Zens, we using the not knowing aspect of the mind by asking the unanswered questions. And when we asking the questions and they have no answer, our mind will create the doubts. And that doubt will be the main means to help us to practice. So based on the practice, um, we have the booklets of how to practice the Patriarch Zen. You should read that. There are 5 questions in that booklet that you can use. Just choose one questions to help you to create the doubt. The questions is only like a cane that Hooven Zen Master explained to help a person the crippled person to walk. It's just like our elusive thinking in the mind cripple us from the walking. So now we're using the questions with no answer in order to create the doubt for us to walk. Nowadays, you can see that because of the advance, the progress in technologies, the knowing are very dominant, and people attach themselves to those knowing. That's why we're using the doubt, the not knowing aspect of the mind in order to go against what we knowing. However, when we're doing the practicing, at first, we might have the problem with, we can go into a sleep. So we just keep asking the questions and go on. So as Bhuvan Zen Master explained, the questions is the means, the cane for us to walk. So we need to ask a question continuously and create the doubt in the mind. That doubt will strip up all the thinkings in the mind for us. So when you use the not knowing aspect of the mind at first, it's very hard to concentrate on that doubt. It's just like we get used to the thinking in the mind and attach ourselves to the thinking in the mind for too long. At first, we're not familiar with asking questions and raising doubts. We need to continue with the practice to keep asking the questions, even though you don't have doubt at first. However, you keep asking the questions, and eventually you will have the doubt. And that doubt will strip up all the thinkings in the mind for you. There are 5 questions in that booklet. The first one is before the heaven and the earth come to existence, what was I? So that questions had no answer. You just keep asking the questions and the doubt eventually will be there. The second question is before the parents was born, what is our original state? The third question is from where that we come to this world and to where do we go after death. The third one is all Dharma will come to one where that one will go to. And the last one, number 5, is it's not the mind, it's not the Buddha, it's nothing. What is it? So we keep asking that questions and we just choose one questions and keep asking the questions and the doubt will come eventually. So those are the direction in practicing. Now we're gonna go into the practice of 30 minutes of meditation asking questions, raising doubts, and then we have 30 minutes of walking. So if you have any questions after the practice, you can ask.